It's coming. Hey, there we are. Good morning, everybody. Wisconsin's 25th District Senator Romaine Quinn is back for our monthly chat today, Thursday, September 26th, 2024. For DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, and you're watching DrydenWire Live, presented by Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin. AFP Wisconsin works to reignite the American dream and break down government barriers that hold us back from our full potential. Find an event near you at afpwisconsin.com and join AFP to fight for more freedom for all Wisconsinites. As you can see, also joining us today is the Republican candidate in Wisconsin's 75th Assembly District race, Duke Tucker. Gentlemen, good morning. Duke, I'll start with you. Congratulations on your primary win. I think there's only 6 weeks left to the election. How are you feeling this morning?
I feel good. Thank you for you guys inviting me to be on with you. That's really nice.
Well, it was Romaine. I said no, but he's what he had to. Romaine, good morning.
Good morning. Good to be back.
Yeah. How are things going in the last month?
Things are good. You know, it's nice not being on the ballot. That's literally the only advantage of being in the Senate as a 4-year term. But yeah, it's fun to watch everyone else have to work their butt off. But of course, I'm out there whenever I can for our colleagues as well.
Yeah. Duke, I want to kind of get to, so last month, Romaine had Chance Green on, so the three of us were on last month, and we were talking about like the 5 biggest issues that because obviously he's running again for re-election, that he felt that was happening in his district or in Wisconsin. I want to change that terminology a little bit and ask you the same question, but really kind of more of like, what are your 5 biggest focuses or priorities, if you were elected? But before that, Romaine, you sent out a guest column yesterday. We published it on our website. See, I should be prepared. Do you know what that was called? Your headline? I don't remember.
I don't remember the headline now.
It is
referencing the upcoming referendum.
Yeah, there you go. Constitutional amendment coming to November ballot. For people who didn't see that, what is that about? Oh, there you go.
So, Duke is prepared.
Nice.
So I see the shadow from my window coming in, so I'm not actually glowing or have slash marks on my face for your viewers. But so on your November ballot, which we know absentee ballots, some of them are already going out, so you could be filling that in anytime and returning those. There is a question and where we are changing one word if it passes in our Constitution. So right now there's already a prohibition that only U.S. citizens can vote, but what we've seen in other states is there's been municipalities, including the District of Washington, D.C., allowing non-citizens to vote in referendums and local elections. And what we want to do is make sure that no municipality in Wisconsin or any future legislature could try to open up the door to grant any voting rights of any kind to those that are non-citizens living here in Wisconsin. So we know we've got a few 100,000 people that are here legally. They're just not citizens. I've got cousins that maintain their Canadian citizenship, but they've been here 20 years. They know they can't vote. You wouldn't know they're Canadian. But it's just to make sure that those people that live here that are non-citizens can't vote. So what we do is we change one word. Instead of saying every, it'll say only in that paragraph. And so it's basically the exact same verbiage, but we're just shutting the door on any weird interpretation by any court or future legislature to try to keep that open. So a lot of people are saying, well, why are we doing this? It's a no-brainer, or what are you even changing? But that's the beauty of it, right? We're just making sure that there is no future potential for any kind of opportunity for shenanigans, no matter who's in the court, no matter who's in the legislature, even when Duke and I are gone, that can't happen.
So this isn't about something that's happening now. This is to future-proof.
Correct. Yep. And I think there are questions now. So we know right now there's an issue most people don't know about. I've been working with Chairman Krug and Chairman Knodel. We have about 90,000 people in Wisconsin that are here legally, that legally have a driver's license or a state ID. And we are asking the DOT right now, please share that list with our clerks so they can cross-reference just to make sure none of them are registered to vote. Because we know they're here legally, or they're on a work visa, or they're permanent legal aliens, and they're here and they can drive and they have a license. We just want to know that they're not registered to vote. The DOT will not share that list. Our attorneys have shown us through state law that they can share the list, but they refuse to. So Tony Evers tomorrow could call his acting DOT secretary and say, turn the list over so clerks can review it. And he will not do that. And so now there's a court case in Waukesha trying to get him to overturn it. And I'm hoping our state standing committees will subpoena the DOT to force them to overturn the records. Again, not saying that there are people voting that shouldn't, but why not just take the issue away, right? Why even let anyone think that it could be happening? Why not just make sure all information's out there for the public so they know they trust the election process no matter who wins post-November? And so there are issues that make you kind of wonder and go, right? So this is just one more area where if you vote yes and this passes, we know in the future there will be no court and no legislature that'll be granting the ability to vote to non-citizens in Wisconsin.
Duke, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think it kind of highlights why I like Romaine so much, because, election security is a big issue. And I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, your vote's got to count. And Republicans and what have been called established Republicans, establishment, have been accused of not caring about election security and all this stuff. He just highlighted that he does care about it. And I will say with this referendum, a lot of the past referendums that we've had, they're very wordy. And people will text me and say, hey, how should I vote on that?
Yeah.
And, what does it mean? And I pay attention in the past, and I've even asked Romaine in past years, what does this referendum really mean for us? And he always gets back to me. Now, this referendum, when your normal citizen reads it, it makes sense. When you read it, it's very easy to understand. And yeah, very supportive of it. And, I know that the Republicans in the Assembly and the Senate passed bills for election security vetoed by the governor, but yet they still get beat up for not caring about election security enough. So I'm glad this kind of clarifies it. And Romaine, thanks for bringing it up. So,
well, every time I hear election integrity, I think Donald Trump. And this is all just from, 2020 thing. But if I try to remove that from my thought process, a lot of the stuff does make sense. Romaine, you said this is actually, I think Duke, you said this is this isn't a party issue necessarily. However, this got put on the ballot, Romaine. How does this get on the ballot?
So in order to pass a constitutional change, the legislature in 2 sessions has to pass the same exact verbiage both times. And we went this route, because we could have done legislation making it crystal clear in statute, which we know sometimes statute can be overturned by the court. But we know if we would have passed this, the governor would have vetoed it, right? He might say, no, I don't support non-citizens voting, but he still would have vetoed it based on our history of every single other bill that he's vetoed. So that's the one route the legislature can take, like we did banning Zuckerbucks, right? We try to pass bills making sure outside groups, third parties, Mark Zuckerberg, George Soros, the evil Koch brothers, whoever it may be, can't give your clerks monies to administer the election, right? Can't send staff to help your clerks run the election. No one outside of government should have a hand in the administration of elections. And the governor vetoed those bills. So we went the constitutional amendment route, which the voters passed, saying, no, you have to be a clerk to handle ballots, and you can't take outside private money to administer elections. And so this is the same route we're taking for this one, right? Changing that one word, locking it up, and giving the voters the right to weigh in. So I've had my usual people on Facebook try to come and say it's a waste of time, and what are you doing? And it's like, is it really a waste of time? Because I'm not making the decision, right? When I voted yes, I'm putting it on the ballot, so you, the voter, get to make
I love
the decision.
that, and I love that. I'm on the Washburn County Board, and Duke, I know you are too. Or not in the Washburn County Board, but in the Burnett County, right? You're still in the Burnett County Board?
Yep.
Yeah, and there's things that come up, and I'm like, boy, I really kind of wish we knew how everybody felt in the county. And obviously we're in a democracy-ish, but we're really more a republic, right? We don't actually, the citizens don't make the decisions. We vote for people to make those decisions. But that is kind of the nice part about this, where it's, all right, it's on the ballot, but now you get to decide. And that doesn't happen very often. So I'm not saying we should do this all the time, but I'm kind of okay with it, because then whatever the Wisconsin citizens want, that's how it's going to end up. But going back to the how does it get on there? So this was passed through the did any Democrat in the Assembly or any Democrat in the Senate, to your recollection, Romaine, vote for this, to put this on the ballot? Or is this
No,
a 100% partisan issue?
Totally partisan. And to my, credit to my colleagues, I don't know of any of them per se that would support non-citizens voting in elections. And a lot of them said, well, it's not necessary. But again, if it's not, even if you don't think it's necessary, all it does is take the issue off the table, right? Vote yes, let people decide, put it in the Constitution. It doesn't mean you're for or against non-citizens voting, or you think it's happening or it's not happening. Why not take the issue off the table? That's what I talk about with all these election bills we passed. Perfect example, the one I wrote, simply said that when you're deemed incompetent by a court as you age, we know more and more people are dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's. That's continuing to be a growing problem. And you are deemed by your family and loved ones in the court that you're incompetent, you no longer can vote. My bill said that the court has to notify WEC. So WEC notifies your clerk to take you off the registration list because you're now deemed incompetent. Right now, there's no mechanism. Your family might call your local clerk and say, grandma's deemed incompetent. Please don't send her an absentee ballot, right? There is no mechanism. So my bill simply said the court has to notify WEC, and that when special voting deputies go into nursing homes, someone contacts the member of your family on your list, right? When you need help, when you have issues, when you have concerns, you have a list of people you trust that call when grandma or grandpa need help. So all we're saying is when the deputies come in to vote and give your grandma or grandpa a ballot, or your mom or dad, you're just going to be notified the day they come and do it. That's all it did. And the governor vetoed the bill. And so what I tell my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, if you are sick of Republicans complaining about election integrity, or the conspiracy theories, or not accepting the outcome of the election, or like this Mark Charles, talking about the orange toddler, right? He hates Donald Trump. If you are sick of these conversations, then just let these bills go through, right? They don't make it harder to vote. They don't make it more hoops for people to jump through. Like, the best way to shut Republicans up or people complaining about election integrity is to let the bills go through that literally don't harm your ability to vote and make people feel more secure, right? Why not just do that? And that's why I just think the governor's really dropped the ball, where if he's sick of us doing this, let some of these bills go through. He doesn't have to sign them. Just let them sit for 10 days. They become law. He doesn't have to put his signature on them if he doesn't want to.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But some of these simple steps, it's like, gosh, man, if you want us to stop talking about it, maybe let a few of these go through that really don't do anything in terms of making it harder to vote, but adds additional security measures. Whether or not you think they're important, just let them go through.
Yeah.
And then you wouldn't have this debate anymore.
Well, so speaking of Mark, he had commented, please show one case in Wisconsin of a non-citizen voting. Go ahead, I'll wait. Which brings up a very good question. Why now? 2024. We've been around for, Wisconsin's been around for a hot minute. Why is this just now being put on?
Because we know in the last 3.5 years, the Biden administration has let over 10 million people into this country illegally. And we know we're catching people from over 100 different countries at the border. We've caught 50,000 Chinese nationals alone just last year. And those are the ones we know about that we caught, not the getaways, right? So we have 10 plus million people who are here in the last 3.5 years that we know potentially could try to find ways. And we're not saying they have or are, but why not take steps to make sure when we know these populations exist? For example, maybe Mr. Charles can answer the question for Governor Evers. We know 90,000 people in this state have driver's licenses and are not citizens. Why can't we just share the list with clerks to make sure they're not voting? What does that do? What's the harm in that, right? What's the harm in just knowing, right? Maybe there's not one out of the whole 90,000 that are registered to vote, but why not check? Those are things that are just mind-boggling to me, right? We don't have to talk about this, and Mark doesn't have to, question us, about whether or not it's happening or not. Let's just know. Let's just take it off the table.
Sure.
And unfortunately, it's just not happening. So I think maybe there's some blame to both sides, but we could definitely solve this. It's just unfortunate it's not getting done.
Well, so election integrity, that seems to be a hot topic, right? And obviously we're in an election cycle here. So Duke, let me ask you, in the 75th Assembly District, the race that you're running, which is largely just Burnett and Polk County, what issues, what priorities? Give us 5, but we'll do, let's not give all 5 right away. In no particular order, unless you want them in order. Maybe these are priorities that if I'm elected, when I get into the assembly, these are the things that I want to champion. These are the things I want to accomplish. Or the issues that you're hearing from people in your district when you go around in your campaign trail and talk to people and to families. What are the biggest issues? So let's start. We'll do 5, and I'm sure there's like 50, but let's just try to get it to 5. Give us one.
Well, thanks for the question. And, I'm really focused on the 75th Assembly District. I'm probably not going to list immigration because that's a federal, national thing. And of course, I care about it. But it's not a day-to-day thing that affects our residents. So I want people to know that first off. I learn about what I think is most important from the people I talk to when I'm outdoor knocking. That's where I get my list from. And I think that's kind of in the title state representative. We're supposed to represent people. And the first and foremost, the thing they hear about that necessarily isn't really a policy issue is divisiveness. They want somebody to go and represent them that knows how to have a conversation without being argumentative about trying to solve issues. They want to see a little bit more collaboration between the parties and people in general. And I'm a lead by example on that. But when it comes down to the day-to-day bread and butter issues, inflation, holy smokes, people are concerned.
Well, hold on a second. Okay, so I have 2 now. Inflation is divisiveness. I remember we had Senator Rob Stafford on a show, and I think even Senator Shockner, I think even echoed something along these lines as well, that most of the bills that actually get done in the Assembly or in the Senate or just down in the legislature, most of that stuff is bipartisan. Now, when I say bipartisan, I think we kind of need to put like a 20% rule on that, because if you have only one Democrat that's voting for it or one Republican, technically it's bipartisan. But shut up, it's not bipartisan. It was just a couple, right? It should be like 20% of the other side has to vote for it, or it's not. But my understanding was, according to both Rob and with Patty, that actually happens more often than not. The majority of things actually are compromise, and both sides agree on the majority. But there's some big topics that don't. So divisiveness is one thing that you're 100% right on, but how are you going to do that?
Well, I'm going to tell you, Ben. You just named 2 people that I know. I communicate with Patty some.
Patty's awesome. I love her.
I communicate with Rob. And the issue that I'm dealing with in our neighborhood is very political, but it should not be. And I will tell you, Rob's position and Patty's position, they're both political. Patty is going so far as telling me that she's not in agreement with the residents area because I'm a Republican.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Patty, I'm sure, is listening. It's not going to come to a surprise to her that I say that. And, so things are very political. Even though she knows I'm a good person and I'm honest, she won't agree with me in public because Rob Stafford maybe doesn't agree with confirming NRB members. We got to start getting to a point where we solve issues for people, and that, we're just not doing it. So, I mean, for me, leading by example, it means that I can still have a conversation with Patty, even though I just said what I did.
Sure.
And I'm going to leave Madison on that. So,
Romaine, do you see a lot of that? Because obviously, public opinion, let's face it, is essentially shaped by media's reaction to situations. It's just how it is. But when you're in the room, as you have been in the Assembly and, of course, now in the Senate, is it I wouldn't say as bad as the media says, but is there more compromise and more of that, I don't know what the opposite of divisiveness is, but is there actually more of those communications and more of that kindness there, or is it really what we see? And, we hate the other people and everything's the worst.
I think it depends on the time of the year. So right now it's kind of campaign mode. Everyone's out on the trail, and due to the maps, and we can argue which side did what, for a lot of members, it is kind of personal, right? You intentionally drew my house out of my district or things like that. But I think there's a lot of issues where there can be compromise. I think there is compromise. It's unfortunate because it's really the fault of the citizens. And I'm just going to say that, because if we weren't such a soundbite society where give me the news in 10 seconds or less, because I'm not going to actually read the article, we wouldn't have so much of what we see is that everyone on the Senate floor, on the Assembly floor, is looking for their soundbite.
I see.
They're looking for their post for social media, their e-update, or something that they can share later on to show they did something. And there's not a lot of substance there. And a person might have worked with someone on a bill for months, and then gets on the floor and craps all over it because, that's what they're expected to do because they need that soundbite. And again, they wouldn't do that if we as citizens were more, I think, thoughtful and in depth on how we research our information. Now, that being said, I don't blame people because we're in a world where we're busy. You're working 2 jobs to keep your head above water. You elect people to do the job and trust them so you don't have to think about and research every single issue. That's what, you hope your government is doing the right thing. But unfortunately, I think it is very partisan. But I would, on most of the meat and potato stuff, it is bipartisan. It's just those hot button issues that kind of stick out.
I remember we did a story a couple years ago. I put an article on DrydenWire, and the headline was, I don't recall the exact headline, but it was study shows majority of people, or maybe a percentage of people, like 90% of people, base their opinions on a headline without reading an article on social media, right? And then when you actually, that was the headline, and then the article says, congratulations, you actually read this article. Now, let's see how everybody responds on Facebook. So then I put it on Facebook, and it was great. Like, everybody that was commenting, oh, yeah, I hate that. And people need to be more informed. I'm like, no. See, you didn't even click on it, because if you did, you realize that wasn't, well, actually, it is true, but that wasn't the point. It was, we just live in this world where it's especially hard on our end. How do you put a whole story into a headline? And you don't want to be sensational, like just stick to the facts, but it gets challenging. All right, so Duke, you said inflation was another one on your list. Elaborate on that, if you would, please.
Well, it affects everything that we do. Everything from transportation, getting yourself from point A to point B, or the cost of goods because of transportation. If you go to breakfast, eggs are a lot more money. Go to the grocery store, you spend more. That is a bread and butter issue that, in the legislature, we got to do as much as possible to get inflation down. And, it's another national type issue, but we got to start being energy independent again. I think that's a large part of it. Another large part of it is overspending in government. And it makes our money worth less. At last I heard we have a $12 billion debt in the state of Wisconsin. We have a surplus. I'd like to see that return to the people or pay down our debt. We got to start living within our means like we do at home, or like we're supposed to do at home. So inflation is a huge deal that people are concerned about. So that's my number 2.
Is that something you had just said that's a national thing? Largely, I would say it probably is. What do you see Wisconsin specific? So if you're elected to the assembly, that you want to start looking into in terms of ways on how we can address inflation from a Wisconsin legislator standpoint?
Well, I want to be honest with you. I'd be new to the assembly. And I'm not the only person in Wisconsin or the only person in the legislature that would think inflation is a problem. I'm going to lean on people like Romaine and other leaders that also know inflation is a problem. They're going to offer ideas because they have more experience than I do. And I'm going to see if it makes sense for people in our district, and I'll agree with them and support it and go after it. But I'm not going to pretend to be a policy expert on what I'm going to introduce.
Yeah, I always think it's funny when people ask all right, so now tell me exactly how you're going to do everything you said. It's, well, okay, here's my plan. First is figure out what the frick I'm doing, because I don't know. I just got here. I don't know. It's not like you're starting your own business, and it's how am I going to hire employees and how am I going to find an insurance company. You have, in the assembly, you have 98 peers. Look, it's a team. It's a group of people. How do you get that done? Romaine, is inflation something in some way or form, directly or indirectly, that the legislature has been working on already?
Yeah, I would say we've taken a number of steps. Inflation is driving the price of everything and making just life in general unaffordable for people, for seniors, fixed incomes, families, you name it, across the board. Anyone that, eats, breathes, drives a car, you're paying more.
Yeah, if you exist, so, right.
Yeah, if you're alive, you feel inflation, unless you're super wealthy. So we've taken a number of steps. We recognize we have a surplus, meaning that after budgeting, after giving more to schools, more to roads, more to infrastructure, more to Medicaid, that we have money left over. We've collected more than we need to run the government. And at a time where you are trying to figure out how to balance your budget month to month, why don't we give that back to you, right? You technically overpaid than what we needed for the government to get by. So as Duke mentioned, I'm a big fan of paying down debt. I wish we would do more of that. This last budget, we did pay for cash for a lot more. So over the next 20 years, we are reducing our debt payments, which is good. But what we can do today is what we tried to do. We passed a number of tax cuts, all vetoed, even after using the governor's own metrics of who the money should go to, right? He said middle class was married couples below $150,000 a year, or single filers 75 grand a year or less. And so the tax cut package that we developed this last session, we used those metrics on purpose because we knew where the governor put his stake in the ground. And unfortunately, they were still all vetoed. Perfect example, the elimination of the retirement income for seniors. You're on a fixed income, maybe you have a small pension, maybe you're drawing from your 401k, and you're being taxed on that, right? We would not charge income tax on your retirement income for Wisconsin seniors of up to that threshold, $75,000 a year for that single filer, or if you're married, $150,000 or less. So think about that. When
That's
we are
huge.
hoping to keep our seniors from becoming residents of Florida, of Arizona, of Texas, of other warm states, we want them here. We want them to spend time with their grandkids. I mean, we don't want them, we can't change the weather, right? But we don't want to force them from a tax standpoint to not stay citizens of Wisconsin. So we can afford it. We can do it. We know seniors on fixed incomes need it. And that was still vetoed. So those are little things, I think, that add up that we can do and we should be doing, and that we're going to do next session again.
So there are ways that we can, maybe not from a large scale, of course, that would be more of the national issue, but there are little things that we can do in Wisconsin. By the way, speaking of debt, I believe the national debt right now is like 4.5 million per minute. So yeah, in the time you were talking, we just spent about $12 million on a national debt. Jeepers, can you imagine being in Congress and having to tackle that?
Nope. Nope.
Nope. No way. Are you kidding?
No.
I don't think that's ever going to get paid off. All right. Give us a third one here, Duke. We got divisiveness and inflation. Give us a third one.
Education, and many issues within education. But I guess the more I talk to people, I actually think each of those issues within education are all related. You know, from the actual send your kids to school standpoint, I'm hearing from teachers, especially the younger grade teachers, that we're having more and more students come into school. They don't have the basic skills, which would come from your parents and parenting, to know how to take instruction to become somebody that can learn. So now where teachers are trying to get them to be quiet, pay attention, be respectful of others so that they can learn. But at the same time, society says, oh, I don't want my teachers raising my kids. But yet society ain't raising their kids so that they can be taught. So, I mean, there's a really disconnect there. It's come back to the breakdown of our family values and understanding that education, some people will say it's right, others say it's a privilege. But until we get to a point where you send your kids to school for a reason to become better so they can be self-sufficient, we're going to have problems. If you send them to school for daycare reasons because you got nothing better to do with them and you run around on your cell phone all day and don't talk to your kids and don't read to your kids, if they're not potty trained, whatever. So we got a lot of problems there. And the other side of education, when they come out of school, we got too many kids that are coming out of school that are not employable. Another area being, you know, there's a large segment of parents that feel there's too much indoctrination in our schools, that we're not focused on the core subjects and curriculum that we want them to have. Math, science, reading, English, history, civics. It's become too much of a social experiment. I mean, we want our kids to go to school. They got to learn respect for others. And it's a social experiment, yes. But it's kind of become what I see in the military. It became a social experiment rather than trying to accomplish a mission the most effective way and efficient way you can. We've got to get away from the social type stuff in school being the priority. We better get back to understanding that education is a privilege. You should be excited about sending your kids to school so they learn how to read and be better. And as a parent, don't you want them to be self-sufficient? You want to take care of them the rest of your life? They say if you do a good job of raising your kids, you won't end up raising your grandkids. I believe in that.
Yeah.
So education is a big deal, many, many things.
Romaine, is there a bill that has come out recently, or maybe something that we could do to force parents to be, parents? Is that a thing?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and I get a lot of emails from teachers on occasion, and we talk budgets and education funding, and obviously it's pretty complex. I'm pretty proud of this last budget. We targeted the most dollars ever towards our lowest spending districts. We raised that threshold, the minimum. So every district can spend up to $11,000 per pupil. And at the same time, we backfilled it so it didn't raise property taxes. But again, a lot of minutia there. And I'll get those emails from teachers saying, what are you doing, this and that? And they tell their stories of how many unruly kids they have and how are they expect to teach the other 15 when they have 5 that can't even sit in a chair. And, I always write back, especially the ones that have taught longer. I'll even ask them, I'm like, what has changed? Like, what is different? Why do you see this as happening? Like, where's the disconnect? Where was the breakdown? What happened? What is driving this? And everyone's kind of got a different idea, but a silver bullet to fix it. Gosh, how do you?
Right, that's the hard part. Okay, we've identified a problem. How do we fix it? Especially when is it simply, Duke, that this is more of parents, you guys need to parent. Well, as a legislator, how are you going to do that?
That's not good enough. That's a answer that everybody can give that makes sense, but there's no solution.
Right. So
I'd love to see education be more local based. You mentioned the DOT earlier not providing a list. I'm going to tell you a story about the next point that I'll bring up with an issue, but the Department of Public Instruction that oversees our libraries and schools. And I guess for me, that's a pretty large agency. You're going to have a hard time convincing me that we don't need less government and more local control. Our school boards, they do a great job on that, but there are so many mandates from the state. If we took the same tax dollars we spend in education right now and moved more of that funding directly to the schools and removed mandates, maybe we could bring discipline back in our schools. I'm not saying we need to beat our kids by any means, but you are talking to somebody who got SWATs in junior high for fighting. So, I did the right thing. I'd do it again, but didn't get the SWATs. But the thing is, we've got to get to a point where we go back to local control on things. If we have mandates that come down to schools and they have to do these certain things to receive funding, I don't like that. I like local control. Government should be closest to the people. It should not be in Madison. And sometimes we got to go to Madison to get government out of our lives a little more. So I think it comes from, for me, we got to have more policy. It takes mandates away from our local schools, but yet keeps the funding level the same. But let's get the people sitting in the chairs in that agency. We need less people sitting in the state agency chairs. That's just the way it is.
Romaine, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I hear from especially under Jill Underly, which is ironic that she's giving her state of the state for education today. I have a lot of superintendents that come to me in secret and quiet saying how big of a disaster DPI is or has been in the last few years. And it stems from the top, right? Not the governor. The DPI is elected, the head of it, the Department of Public Instruction, the superintendent, she's elected. And I hear from school board members, especially those in northern Wisconsin, where, we don't go to school every day thinking about how can we teach kids to think about every kind of gender there is and, all these other issues we see going on. Kids are just there to learn and be kids and, socialize and do the things, kids do. And they're getting, all these training courses for teachers and the literature and the videos. And I get messages from school board members all the time, like, what is the stuff that DPI is putting out? And again, back to Duke's point, do we need that? I think our teachers, a lot of them, the schools supply the curriculum, but they're developing their own lessons plans. I don't think they need a video from DPI on how to run their classroom, right? And so maybe there is more of that. I think a lot of our positions in DPI are federally funded, which again is another topic. Should there even be a federal Department of Education or not? But Duke's right. The more we can push that stuff back down locally, the better. And actually, we're looking at a bill right now to kind of do the same thing, but with federal legislation. Is if I have a school district that doesn't want to comply with the new Title IX changes, right, where the Biden-Harris administration, which will continue depending on the November election, is trying to force our schools to change Title IX to recognize gender, right? So you have to have policies or you're in violation of Title IX if you don't allow people to use the bathroom they identify with, the locker room they identify with, all those issues, which our districts up here are very caring. They're very respectful and they're very reasonable in how to accommodate children who aren't comfortable with where they're at in life. And we can do that, right? Without the federal government telling us how we have to do it. and still maintain the values that we all care about. But we have threat of losing federal funding. So we're looking at legislation that says maybe the state will backfill school budgets if they lose federal dollars for not complying with some of these regulations that as a community we don't agree with, right? And so those are also things that we can pursue that I'm looking forward to pursuing next session as well, especially depending on how the November election goes.
All right. I got to head up on that thing there, because I'm so glad to hear Romaine say that. And, we're not going to agree on everything all the time if I'm elected there, but I could tell you, I sure like how he comes at things. But tonight, I'm going to be attending what's called a Moms for Liberty get-together down in Osceola in the southern part of the district. And Moms for Liberty is about liberty and the Constitution, so on and so forth. And they're against the Title IX, mandates. And, they're not a crazy group. I mean, I don't want to be associated with any crazies, really, but it's a common sense group. And I'm going to be down there tonight. And if anybody wants to learn more about that issue, come down there, because I'm sure they'll welcome you.
Well, if you invited them, tell them where. Osceola where?
I'll have to post it on my Facebook page, the address. Okay. I don't have it on me right now, but it's at 6:00. And okay. I'll post it for Wisconsin Facebook page.
Got it. All right, let's move on. We have what do you have so far of your 5? Divisiveness, inflation, and education. Number 4.
Infrastructure.
Ooh. Well, that's a pretty big umbrella.
Well, it is, but infrastructure, the state of our roads, believe it or not, I hear that a lot. And what's kind of nifty about that is that, Romaine talked about how the DOT isn't turning over a list of people that have gotten IDs and driver's license and so on. And I hadn't heard that before, but I will tell you, just this past, earlier this week, I was down in La Crosse for a Wisconsin Counties Association convention, because I'm on the county board.
Yeah, I was supposed to go to that one. Whoops.
I noticed you weren't there. Yeah. But you got other things going on. But anyways, one of the breakout sessions was put on by the DOT. And I wasn't on the same page with that individual as the deputy secretary of the DOT. He talked about all the projects that were going to be going on and the ongoing studies and so on and so forth, and had on the screen where these projects were. There was not one project on the screen that was north of Interstate 94. We talked about carbon. We talked about how the climate change affects the roads and all these kind of things. I am not a big climate change kind of guy. I mean, I know this place was covered by glaciers at one point, so of course the earth is warming and whatever. But the thing is, when I go door to door talking to people, they want the roads fixed. They aren't talking about, how is climate change affecting the roads, which wrecks my car that costs me to fix it. They want the roads fixed. There's just too much of this indoctrination going on. When we send money into the DOT, that's to fix our roads. Let's get to it. Let's get on with it. And I did raise a question, and I asked them directly about it. There were a couple of Polk County supervisors there as well. And after I spoke, one of those got up and said, yeah, let's fix our roads. But we do not have enough. We've got too much bureaucracy at the state government level even. We are not getting the funding out there, and we're not getting things done. And I'm tired of it.
Wait, hold on. Is it that we're not getting things done? You had said anything north of Highway 8. Is it that we're not getting things done, or we're not getting things done north of Highway 8?
I said 94.
I'm sorry, 94. I apologize.
There's money coming up here, and they can show us that. But the bottom line, there just isn't enough emphasis on the northern part of the state. There just isn't. And how can I prove that? The roads are terrible. I mean, there's potholes everywhere on our state highways. We don't need ongoing studies on how bad the roads are.
Just drive around.
30. Just come up and drive down the roads. When you lose your tire in a pothole, you'll know that it needs to be done. We don't need the grant process that's qualified by scoring that says you care about climate change and all this stuff. Fix the roads.
Romaine, how do you think the DOT is doing as it relates to infrastructure vis-a-vis roads?
Yeah, I mean, there's always more work to do. This last budget, we set aside specifically an additional $150 million for local roads. And there's a big difference too, right? We have the state backbone that's the state's responsible for, and then there's the county trunks, and then you've got your township and municipal roads. So obviously we injected a lot more shared revenue into our communities, and specifically for ARIP, the Agricultural Road Improvement Program. trying to build those roads up near our dairies or logging industries that we know the roads get beat to heck. But no, we're on a replacement schedule that's not good enough. And the frustrating part is we were making progress and then inflation. And so when you talk about inflation as local family budget, inflation is killing the state of Wisconsin. The wages that we have to up for our prison guards to even attract people, to even maintain the minimum staff to keep prisoners in prison. I mean, it is driving the state budget through the roof as well. I mean, as we were making progress on roads, the cost of asphalt to do a mile of a town road, is more than double than it was just 5 to 10 years ago, right? And so, hey, I gave you 10%, but the cost of asphalt is 40% since 2020. How do you make those numbers work? And so that's the frustrating part too, is the progress you've made. It's not just erasing your family budget. It's really been erasing the gains we've made even as a state. And so we got to continue to, again, balance what people can afford to pay. And then where's the money going? Like Duke said, we can always be more efficient. We can always look at how we allocate resources and do a better job. And that's what we got to continue to do.
You can always just raise taxes. That'll solve your problem.
This DOT speaker, though,
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, okay.
Money issue at all. And it just sounded like a quagmire. He said the money is there. So Romaine, the legislature did their job funding, getting the roads fixed, but we're not getting it out there. But Romaine made a really great point there talking about asphalt. I think it's like $170,000 a mile to blacktop when the base is prepared already. And yeah, it's huge. But when you go back to inflation and the national issue of oil production and all that, it's directly related to that. It's not only the cost of the asphalt, you still have to get it to where it needs to go, and you still got to put it down, and that all takes fuel too. So, I mean, we've got to start drilling for oil again. We got to start getting energy costs down and use the energy we have right here.
What the things that lay down roads? We should just make those like electric, right?
Yeah.
Solar powered. That'd be great. That'd be interesting to see. I don't even think you could do that with all that power. All right, give us. We're almost up against our time, so give us your last, your fifth priority or focus.
Right. I hear a lot about healthcare and the closing of hospitals. I hear that too. Actually, on the way home from the Wisconsin Counties Association, I chose to ride with a couple different people, not the ones I rode down there with. And they more on the other side of the fence. And I think it's good to ride with people that I disagree with. I learn the most from. And, that healthcare came up in our conversation. And from what I'm gathering about healthcare, especially the closing of these hospitals, I don't think that our publicly funded healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare type activities, Badger Care, I don't think hospitals can charge the same for services to those healthcare systems like they do to private insurance. Like for the private insurance, I have to pay a part of my insurance where I'm employed, but the employer pays most of it. Our insurance company is charged more for certain services than what these publicly funded healthcare services are. So the private industry is subsidizing the lack of payment for that. And it causes a lot of problems. It raises our premiums because now our insurance companies are paying more than what they really should. But then the question came up on the way back, well, geez, Duke, would you support a buy-in? Can I buy in to be on Badger Care even though our income is higher than what is required to meet up with the requirements? Mm-hmm. I said, well, that sounds good. But I said, I don't know that Badger Care really can stand on its own right now for the reason I just told you. If Badger Care is only paying, let's say, I don't know what the number is, but let's say 75% of what the actual bill would be, you can't have somebody buy into a system that already doesn't stand on its own. And at the same time, the fellow that helps me a lot with putting in signs and that kind of stuff, he doesn't have healthcare insurance. Can't afford it, but he does well. He works really hard. He pays out of pocket. And his wife just fell and broke her leg.
Ooh.
Yeah, and he negotiates with the hospital to a lesser cost. Well, why would it be that, why are you charged difference if you have insurance versus not having insurance versus having a state or national funded healthcare?
Yeah, so hold on. So I'm trying to understand this. So if all three of us, Romaine, Duke, and myself, we all get a broken wrist, and we all go to our own primary care provider that we use. I don't have insurance. And now, what do the other two have, Duke? Are you give me
One,
so?
you don't
Let's
have
say
insurance.
let's
I
say
have
Badger Care for you,
yeah,
and
Badger
then
Care
what
for
for
me.
Romaine?
Private insurance for Romaine.
And what is what would private insurance be?
Well, let's say I work at the telephone company in Grantsburg.
Uh,
We have a national organization that has a healthcare plan.
okay, got it. All right, got it. So he has it through that. You have Badger Care, and I don't have anything. And the
Yep.
bill, you're saying the bill would be different. Actually, let's
Yeah.
say we all go to the same hospital, right?
Well, I was
And
gonna tell
one
you
of them is
that.
$5,000, and one's $4,000, one's $3,000. Are you telling me like there's a difference in the actual?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I knew that if it was all like $5,000, and then but depending on what you have, what percentage is paid and how much you have to pay. But why would they? Romaine, is that a thing?
Now I gotta tell you something too. That there's a young family that lives down in Altoona that I used to work with. He was a part-time worker for us at the phone company. He's now into medicine, radiology, and he tells me some of this problem in Eau Claire with closing hospitals. Insurance companies, private insurance companies, being that they are charged more than what they maybe should be for a certain procedure, they start making arrangements with, like strip mall provider type things that provide the same services for a reasonable amount of money. Well, now the Badger Care people and Medicaid, Medicare people, they go to the hospital. The hospital can't make the money they really need to make to provide the health care for them, but yet now the other insurance companies aren't using the hospital because they get overbilled. That makes the hospital not be able to make money. That's part of the equation. He told me that.
That's a huge problem.
He's into it. So
Romaine?
Yeah, there's a huge problem that we're going to have to address as we see specialized clinics continue to pop up. Right? We know there's Oakleaf in our area, and again, if your insurance covers it, you want the best, right? You want the guy that does the knee 300 times a year to do your knee, not the one that does 50. But when you go there and not your community hospital, your knee surgery, what they make off that is now not going back into the emergency room department, right? Oakleaf doesn't run an emergency room department, but your local hospital does. And so now your hospital is they don't make money on emergency rooms, but it's a service the community needs and expects. And so now they're trying to figure out, how do you pay for the emergency room, because I'm not making the money off the knee surgeries now, because they're going to a specialized clinic. And so that's really very simplistically part of the reason HSHS went down. You could see the competition is good, right? But when you have entities that can do the cream of the crop surgeries or specialties that make the money and not have to do the other things that lose money, how do you expect a community hospital to stay open? It's the same thing in Rice Lake. We've seen an addition and a growth of Oakleaf in Rice Lake. Now there's people that are not going to Marshfield Clinic in Rice Lake to get their shoulder done, their knee, right? And so it compounds the problem. And so how do you tell people where they can and can't go for care? So that's going to be a question we have to ask. Or as we see staffing agencies, right? We've got nurses that will leave Marshfield Clinic and they will go work for a temp agency, and they'll come back and work in the same hospital and make twice the wage because the hospital is short of staff and they have to hire someone. So they bring in a temp agency, and the same staff who was there maybe last year is now back making twice as much than his or her colleagues that are still making the same wage, right? And what does that do for that environment? So there's a lot going on in healthcare right now. There's a lot of things we can try to address and help. We have this last session a little bit on a number of fronts. I work closely with the Wisconsin Hospital Association, but there's more to do. There's definitely more.
We're going to remain one of the future show idea. We should get Mike Schaefer, Splinter L CEO. We should have him on and kind of get his perspective on a lot of this stuff too.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Duke, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Real quick, how's the campaign going?
I'm having fun with it. I didn't realize being new to politics, I've never been really outwardly political for so long. And
shoot. I'm sorry. I terribly sorry to interrupt. I just saw that Mike actually was watching and just commented. So sorry, Mike. I just volunteered you for a show, buddy. Buying the Badger Care will make the problem worse, as they pay much less than cost providing care. General acute care hospitals and critical access hospitals all have charity. Oh shoot, where to go? All have charity care policies. They'll discount bills for uninsured. Got it.
Boy, am I glad he chimed in with that. And I don't know Mike, but I I'm glad he chimed in with that, because I was going to follow in and say, we just can't allow a buy-in, because if that program can't stand on its own already, we can't do it. You're just going to make the problem worse.
Yeah.
But we got to do something there. And, I'm friends with a CEO at a local hospital here, and I hear these issues, and, it's really maddening, and there's many layers to the problem. And, and I think that's what I enjoy, going back to the campaigning part. I love talking to people. I love solving problems. And, we'll see how it goes. I'm excited about the opportunity, and the schedule's just fine. I don't mind being out late at night every night. I think last night was the first night I was home for supper with Roxy, and had her daughter Olivia over too. But it doesn't happen often.
Well, who's Roxy?
That's my wife.
I'm sorry. Your name is Duke, her name is Roxy. Like, those are like the two greatest names ever, and you guys happen to be married.
Well, she wasn't happy with me last night, though, because I was out at the kitchen table, and I'm making some campaign buttons.
Oh, sure.
And I was kind of noisy, so she wasn't real happy with me when she went to work last night, because I was too noisy for her rest. So, but I'll apologize and we'll move on.
So you're not like waiting, like champing at the bit, like 6 weeks, like let's go, so you're enjoying the process.
Yeah, Ben, I'm going to tell you, win or lose, I'm the same guy. It's just the way it is. And people told me even during the primary, they'd say, well, are you nervous, or are you this, or are you that? Well, I was kind of considering whether or not I just go home and go to bed on Tuesday, because you're not going to change the results. And I'm the kind of person that, I understand that if I work out in my shop on a project, when I get done with that project, it's going to work exactly how I want it to work, because I won't stop until it does. But when it comes to this process, you got to trust the people. You got to trust the process. And if they don't choose you to represent them, you really have to go home and understand that maybe that person that the people chose will probably do a better job for me than I would have. And I wouldn't be bitter about losing. You get behind the candidate, and it is what it is. And either people agree with you or not, but campaigning is about, to me, putting yourself out there to show people who you are. And once you are elected, you got to go into more of a listening mode to find out how you best represent them. And win or lose, I'm the same. I'm not worked up about it. I'm not excited about it. I'm just know that there's a job to do. And if I'm elected to do it, I'm going to work hard. And
where can people go and find out more information about you and your campaign?
Oh, Facebook. You can go to my first personal Facebook page, or I get the Duke for Wisconsin Facebook page. I also have a dukeforwisconsin.com website. But by and large, they can call me, text me. I'm happy to put my number out there, message me. I get messages all the time to not only put out signs, but to come and meet people. And I have not returned a call or a message to anybody. I go meet with people in the garage and whatever. And I think we got to be accessible. And I'll be even more accessible if I'm elected after I retire from the telephone company coming up fairly soon. Right. And, whether I win the election or not, I plan on stepping back from being the operations manager the first of the year. And because, whether you're elected or not, the last thing I want to have happen when I die is somebody say, oh, Duke worked at the phone company for 50 years. Well, who cares about that? You got to make a difference for people. When you achieve the American dream, you've got to help others do the same. So.
Well, best of luck to you in November. Romaine, any parting words? Oh, looks like you're getting all choppy. I think you lost Romaine.
Yeah. No, I'm back. I don't know why I'm doing that, but
and you're back.
Anyways,
our internet,
Duke doesn't need luck. He's going to win.
Yeah, it is. You know what? That's for another conversation. All right. Yep. Thank you so very much. Special thank you to our guest today, Senator Romaine Quinn and 75th Assembly District candidate Duke Tucker, for taking time to come on for a chat today. I'll see all of you right back here tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. when I will be chatting with the Democratic candidate in the 75th Assembly District race, Jane Kleiss. And again on Tuesday when Barron County Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald and I'll be back for our latest episode of Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy. So until then, thank you for watching and have a blessed day.